Welcome to Failure is Progress, presented by Sweat Factory CrossFit. I am Coach Frankie Ortega.
And I am Coach Keith Barber. Join us today as we discuss everything going on inside the CrossFit space and, more importantly, what new and exciting things are happening in our Sweat Factory CrossFit gyms.
As always, thank you to all of our listeners. We appreciate the support and truly enjoy the feedback we've been receiving from all of you.
Please reach out through our DMs on Instagram. If you aren't already following us, please do so at Failure is Progress, all lowercase. And now, on to today's episode.
All right, and we are back. Keith, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Stuff from all this turkey.
Last week was definitely a calorie-heavy week. I hope everybody has recovered and maybe burned off a few calories over the weekend. Let's get into today's topic, man. I know that in the last episode we talked about consistency and I brought up the whole mechanics, consistency, intensity thing. And I think today's a good day to talk about, why we want to concern ourselves with the boring stuff first, which is our mechanics and technique, before we get into the intensity and volume. So, and we were just talking about how great this topic was because yesterday we had an assessment day. We had our front squat assessments. I had a lot of people who were, trying to go for their front squats, and I made it very clear that I wanted everybody to be able to get to a full depth squat before they added any weight to their barbell. And for a lot of people, that it's almost like offensive.
Yeah.
Like, why do you want me to not put weight on my bar? I'm here to lift heavy things. But there's so much more than just the safety aspect of it, right? Because it's not just lifting heavy weight. So, go into that from your experience, all the different important things that are happening when we aren't getting a full range of motion.
For sure. One of the reasons I love the L1 is because it really dives into technique and mechanics and the importance of them. As CrossFitters, we should be technicians. So things that bother Keith that shouldn't bother Keith 1001 is when people are like, oh, we're CrossFitters, we don't worry about technique. And it's just like, that's so not true. But
they really do dial it in the L1.
Yes,
for sure.
Definitely explain the importance of that, and it ties directly into what you just said, our safety, efficacy, and efficiency. If your technique doesn't accomplish all three of those goals, it's probably not a very good technique.
Right.
And so we'll go through them one at a time. Safety, obviously, not intentionally injuring yourself or putting you closer to injury or putting you at disadvantaged positions that could potentially injure you at some point. For instance, we don't deadlift with our back completely rounded and our legs perfectly straight with our knees hyperextended, because that would be moving us closer to injury. There may be some purpose for that technique. CrossFit isn't one of those domains where we use that. For instance, that would be appropriate if you are a gymnast using super light weight and you're doing some Jefferson curls. That's exactly what a Jefferson curl is. You're rounding your back out. You're keeping your knees super locked out to add load to your flexibility work, right?
Right.
But if you're doing 25 deadlifts for time in a 4-round workout, it's probably not the best technique for you. And then we have efficiency, which is CrossFitters love to talk about how their technique is efficient, and that's usually all they care about, is because efficiency allows you to get higher up on the leaderboard, and that's great. Efficiency is just making sure that every part of your effort goes into moving into whatever movement you're trying to do. For instance, if you're doing a dumbbell snatch, it's going to be a little bit more energy efficient, depending on the weight, obviously, for you to go up in one smooth motion instead of dropping under it and then having to stand up that last quarter squat again. So a lot of people will pull all the way up over their head, even if in some cases that's not the best technique, because you're actually burning out your shoulder a little bit more if the weight is too heavy. So that's why I said It depends on what kind of weight you are using. It might be more efficient for you to drop under it. But some people are like, well, it's faster if I go over my head. Well, fast is only one aspect of efficiency.
Right.
And then finally, efficacy. Efficacy is probably, in my opinion, the I was going to say that it's the most important in my opinion, but I take that back because they're all equally important. Yeah, if you're not doing one of them, then you're missing a massive piece of the puzzle, and there's only 3 of them. So
Right.
if you don't have one of them, you messed up. Efficacy is I'm gonna oversimplify this, but basically, are we actually moving towards our goals with this technique? For instance, if you are, like yesterday, we had an assessment for our front squats. If during the coming weeks you have been using a shorter range of motion for your front squats, and then when you go to assess, you use a full depth range of motion for your front squats, then you've been training with less efficacy than you were going to test with, because the test is going to be on full range of motion. You know what I mean? You're not going to build that strength through that full range of motion by doing partial squats. So are we actually moving towards our goals by using this technique? For instance, let's say your goal is to be able to handstand walk one day. And you're like, okay, I want to be able to do a 25-foot unbroken handstand walk. But then every time you see handstand push-ups in a workout, your hands are super wide. Your head is in line with your hands. It's a very short range of motion. And you're like, well, this is the most efficient way to do your handstand push-ups. And you're like, okay, I understand what you're saying, but is it actually going to get you from coming off of the wall to doing a handstand walk? Probably not.
Okay. So, and using that specific example, right, your handstand walks, in terms of safety, right, if we're not practicing the technique and dialing in how to get into those handstand presses properly, and I'm sure a lot of us have done this, right, where we get a movement sort of halfway, and then we stick to doing it that way because it works. And instead of dialing it back and continuing to push forward to make sure that we have it dialed 100%, where does it start to hurt us where we're not doing, I'll use an example that's a little bit clearer, right? A kipping pull-up versus a strict pull-up.
Mm.
I wasn't able to do a strict pull-up before doing kipping pull-ups, right? I needed that help. But now I can do strict pull-ups. Was it detrimental to me to not start with the strict pull-up and not do kipping pull-ups first? Like, I kind of lost the question. Like, was it detrimental to me to do the kipping pull-up, which is more efficient, but only because it helps me cheat? Right?
Well, no, it is more efficient because you can do more work in less time.
Right.
So it's very efficient. Is it the safest thing to start out with kipping pull-ups before you hit your strict pull-ups? And probably not. You don't really have the strength to control that range of motion. Is it going to get you to efficacy you need to reach your goals? Well, then we have to have that conversation about what your goals are. Is the goal to do a strict pull-up? If the goal is to do a strict pull-up, then you're, like you said, you're kind of using a crutch almost. Mm-hmm. To get you there. So it's probably going to take you longer to get that strict pull-up than if you did dedicated strict pull-up work. I feel like you got your strict pull-up after getting your kipping pull-up simply because you continue to get stronger. It wasn't the fact that you got your kipping pull-ups first and, oh, my kipping pull-ups helped me get my strict pull-ups. It was like, no, I stayed consistent. I stayed dedicated in the gym. I got my kipping pull-up. I stayed consistent. I stayed dedicated to the gym. I got my strict pull-up. I don't think one happened because of the other.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does. It does. But I guess the question that I was trying to ask before that I didn't know how to ask properly was, could I have hurt my ability to get a strict pull-up by doing kipping pull-ups? Like, could I have
Mm.
I don't know, overstrained my lats or pulled a rotator cuff or something, because I was doing a movement that I wasn't able to do in a strict fashion first?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. And that goes back to having the strength to maintain your technique. You probably, when you started doing your kipping pull-ups, you probably got the first two or three of them with very solid technique, but that technique broke down very quickly because you didn't have the strength to maintain it, and that's when we're pushing ourselves closer to injury. So that's why there's that rule about getting strict work before you start your kipping work or adding momentum to a movement. And it's simply for those two things. One, the efficiency of the movement. If you have the strength through that range of motion, you're going to be more efficient. That's just physics. But then also the safety aspect. If you can't control your body through that range of motion, through a strict range of motion, then you definitely can't control it through through adding momentum to that movement. Because now you have energy that's flowing that you can't control.
Which is increased strain on your muscles and your joints and your ligaments.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, for all of us listening who come to the gym and, we know we can't do a full depth squat, or we know, I'll use a push up, for example. There's a lot of people who can't do a full strict push up, right? All the way to the ground, let's say hand release. That would be a full strict push up, right? What is the easiest way to sell an athlete on stop trying to do it this way? I would really prefer you to do it this way for your safety and for the betterment of your development.
I think you just answered your own question. That is the way to sell it to him, is be like, hey, like the way you're doing this right now may get you to your goal. So that's the efficacy part. But at what cost? You're going to cost yourself the safety of your shoulders and possibly your hips because your core isn't stable enough through that range of motion that it's going to add some anterior pelvic tilt, or it's going to do something else that may mess up with your lower back. Excuse me. As far as efficiency, this technique will work and get you to your goals, but is it going to get you there quickly? Not only is it going to get you there quickly, but once you do get there, are you going to be struggling through that range of motion, just being able to struggle through it for more reps, if that makes sense? Like right now, you don't have any, and we have you doing a push up off of a box, and they're super hard off of a box, but your elbows are all flared out. Your core is completely lax, so you have a deep arch in your lower back, and you're struggling through them with very poor technique. But you're able to struggle through more reps. So instead of struggling through 5, now you can struggle through 10, and you feel like you can go to the floor and use that same technique. I mean, you're not wrong. You can, but at what cost? Is it worth ruining your lower back and your shoulders and then also not really getting the gains as quickly as you could if you cleaned up your technique, stayed a little humble, and really worked on getting stronger?
Yeah, there's a word you said that stuck out to me, and it was quickly, right? I think one of the things that has been beneficial for me personally has been understanding that nothing is going to come quickly.
Yeah.
And so anytime that I've had to work on something, I've always seen it as a long-term thing, right? Pull-ups or handstand push-ups, double unders. I've been on those for a year and a half now, still don't have them, right? But I understand that it's something that is going to take time, and by continuing to work on it outside of class hours and really focusing on the I don't know how to say it, the slower pacing of those strict movements, that is how I have been able to get a lot of these. And I think it's important for all of us listening to understand that. Like, I think it was like one of the second or third podcasts that we did where we talked about, self accountability.
Mm.
If we hold ourselves accountable and really look at our technique, right? Squat has been one that I've been really big on, just because of, one, it's such a big part of the L1. The actual squat is like the epitome of all the movements or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or I guess it's the easiest one to really nitpick on people.
Well, it's just the most transferable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love the squat and the air squat. I feel like now I want to teach everybody a squat because everybody does it their own way. And I think it's also because as kids we just do it so well, and we grow up and we feel like nobody's going to teach us how to do something we've been doing our whole lives, right? But I think that if we really look at ourselves and say, you know, can I get a full depth squat, right? And just try to go for one. And if you can, great, right? Now you have people who can get a full depth squat, but they have, you know, what we call the wink, right?
Mhm.
Where you get a full depth squat, but now it's not as effective because you went too low. So you have to know how to be effective in your full depth squat, right? So it's like there's always something to work on. There's always something to do better. I forget who it was that I saw recently that posted something on Instagram about don't forget like the foundational movement to whatever movement you're doing. You know, if you can do muscle ups, that's great. Don't forget every once in a while to do kipping pull-ups in a workout.
Yeah.
Don't forget every once in a while to do strict pull-ups in a workout, because they'll kick your ass just because you can do muscle ups, right?
Yeah.
So I think that kind of stuff is really important, and it's important for us as athletes to really hold ourselves to that. Anytime I've coached a class, I tell people, even if you're not going to do X movement in the workout, yesterday, for example, power cleans, even if you're not going to do power cleans, if we're doing a power clean progression, grab a PVC pipe and go through it, because your body's going to respond to it. And even if you're going to go into kettlebell swings or whatever afterwards, you're going to move better because you did the progression going into it.
Yeah.
And I think that's important, man. Let's talk about intensity and volume, right? So we'll go back to the push-up example, right? You can do 5 and your technique isn't perfect, but then all of a sudden you can do 10, your technique still isn't perfect. Like, when do you move them over to a push-up off the ground versus staying at just always doing them off the box?
Okay, so we are increasing load.
We're increasing, yeah.
Okay. I would say, yeah, I think you answered your own question again. I think that's what I'm struggling with, because if you can hit 10 reps off of a box, then it's probably time to move you on to the next level. You know what I mean? Like at that double digits point, it's like, all right, you're especially if you're able to. So I think that's a better answer. I think I was talking before I started thinking. That's a problem that I have a lot. So now that I've thought about it, now that I have thought about it,
I'm glad everybody else is listening to this too. I'm not the only one.
Hear me ramble.
Yeah, I mean, again, I know that this is very subjective, right? But like I said, using that example, let's say we have push-ups or push press, right? In our first 15-minute, where we're just doing concentric, and then we'll go into the WOD, right? And the WOD has push-ups. At what point do we tell that athlete, hey, look, I know that there's a lot of push-ups in the workout and you're probably thinking of using a box. Now is a good time, I think, for you to try to do them off the ground. Keep the box to the side, but now's a good time for you to try to do them off the ground, even if you get through the first 2 rounds, and then you can go to the box for the third one because you tire out, right? Mm-hmm. So I've done this a lot with my pull-ups. I'll do pull-ups for the first 2 rounds, and then I get worn out, and I'll switch to ring rows. Mm-hmm. Or I'll do kipping pull-ups, and then I'll go into singles, right? At which point, that's the question, at which point do we as coaches see our athletes and say, you know what, you've put in a lot of work. I see you now getting a little bit better. Let's try to do this.
Yeah, like I said, now that I've had a chance to think about it, kind of 2 answers to that question. My first standard is, can they maintain at least 80% solid technique through their reps? So let's say we have 5 rounds for time and there's 15 push-ups every round. Through all 5 of those rounds, can they maintain that 80% technical movement pattern throughout all 5 rounds. If they can do that, then okay, it's time to have that conversation after class. Hey, bro, you crushed it, or sis, you crushed it. Great job today. I think next time we can try a couple reps off the floor because your technique's looking really good. You finished in the stimulus time, so you're meeting our expectations as far as stimulus is. Maybe it's time to make it a little bit harder. Or you just smashed through the stimulus. You didn't even get close to what the stimulus was supposed to be. It's definitely time to move you up.
Okay.
That, as well as how well they are at repeating the same effort. For instance, if that same example, 5 rounds, we got 15 push-ups every round. Let's say the first 5 reps of every round are absolutely perfect, and then obviously you get smoked and it starts to get less than perfect. But the fact that you're repeating that effort every time lets me know that this isn't a technical problem. This is a capacity problem. So we probably just need to work on your endurance a little bit more, rather than you don't have the strength to repeat this effort. So it's kind of twofold there, where some people, they'll be able to repeat the effort, but then their technique is like 60% across the 5 rounds. And it's like, okay, we need to work on technique a little bit more before we move you up. Or it'll be a thing to where it's just like a capacity issue. Your first 5 reps of every round look really, really good. You just don't have the capacity to continue that technique throughout the rest of those reps. And it's like, okay, we can start to make this a little bit harder for you as we work on your endurance. But this number of reps is probably where we need to stick at. That's probably where you're at, excuse me, where we just need to work on the endurance a little bit. Your first round is really, really good. Next round is pretty good. And then after that, you're like, man, I'm smoked. I'm doing singles. I'm going to switch to ring rows. So that's more of like a capacity issue. You have the technique. The technique is there. We probably can start having you do some chest to bar. You did chest to bars the other day, so we can start leveling you up. We just have to manage how much volume we give you at the next level so that you can maintain your technique.
Yeah, definitely. Capacity is for sure my problem. I definitely need to work on that. But yeah, I like that response, specifically the gauging by the workout, right? Seeing how far they were from the stimulus and if it was too easy. A lot of times we'll see that, right? We'll put up a workout and it'll say 15 minutes and you'll have people finish in 8 minutes and you'll have people finish in 20. So some people went too hard and some people didn't go hard enough. And it is difficult as a coach to try to manage if you have 10 or 15 people in the class all doing, that. But I think it's best practice for us to try to gauge, obviously knowing our athletes, try to gauge which ones are the ones that are really saying, you know what, I want to go harder. I want to go harder. You're telling me you want to go harder, but you missed the stimulus by a few minutes. So next time, on the next workout, whatever the workout may be, let's try to push a little bit more. I'm a huge believer in scaling. I think scaling is your friend. I will always scale according to not just my ability, but more so to my desire for that day. If I come in and I know that I can power clean 95, but I can't run a mile in 10 minutes, I'll scale down a color and I'll probably keep the weight, but I'll try to go for like, what is it, 1,200 meters instead of a full mile. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that is my weakness. Now, should I work on my weakness? Yes, I do a lot, but I still can't run faster.
Yeah. But to the point of technique, like maybe doing that mile is going to push your capacity too much to where you are so far past your threshold technically that you're actually not getting better at running. You may get some capacity, but your run technique isn't going to get better. Your lungs will get more adapt to taking in oxygen and using that as fuel. Your muscles won't burn as much, but your technique is still going to suffer. So we're still not going to be safe. You're going to be moving closer to injury. You're probably not going to be moving to your endurance goals as quickly. So it's not going to be very efficient. You probably have a ton of energy leaks because the technique isn't there. So you're wasting a ton of energy, meaning it's not efficient. And then, like I just mentioned, it's going to take you longer to get to your goals. because the distance is too much for you to work on that technique. So there goes the efficacy right there. So by scaling, what you're doing is you're maintaining your technique within your threshold. You're probably pushing it a little bit close to that threshold, but you're not going past that threshold. So you're still able to work on your technique and build your lungs and increase your leg capacity and your calves, and all your tendons and joints stay safe. That way you're actually getting better rather than just doing it. All right, well, I can run, so I can do this mile. And then it takes you 13 minutes. And it's like, well, that wasn't really the stimulus. You didn't get any technical aspect out of that because your lungs were burning. And now
Yeah.
it's just this constant revolving door or hamster wheel of not getting better at that, but trying to do more.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I said, man, I think this is one of those things where it really comes down to our desires and our accountability. I've seen a lot of athletes who are okay with not moving the needle in any direction, right? They want to come in every day and do what they can do. And then there's a lot of athletes who come in who want to progress and who want to get better at certain things, and I applaud them. I applaud all of them actually, because I know for some people, just getting to the gym is a win every day. Um, but for the sake of our conversation, right? Mechanics or technique will always be more important. You have definitely taught me that. I think before I met you, it was important to me, but not to the extent that it is now, where I'm trying to take care of all the other little things to make sure that the technique is there. Um, being able to work on my mobility so that I can get my technique better, being able to um, assess what the workout is to make sure that I'm not overdoing it. Like I cared about it before, but I definitely am more aware and more in tune with it now. So I appreciate your influence in that regard. You're famous for saying I'm not strong, I just have really good technique. So I like I said, man, I think this is important for all of us. We really need to, most importantly, stay safe.
Yeah.
I agree with you. The safety, efficacy, and efficiency is important. I think safety is really more important than all the other ones, because if the safety goes out the window, then the other two don't really matter.
Yeah.
Um,
I'll agree with that. From a member perspective, yeah, you definitely want to stay safe. Being healthy is like why you're coming to the gym. So if you're injuring yourself because of your
yeah,
poor technique, then that kind of, like you said, the other two just fall.
yeah, and I'll tell you one person that you've influenced a lot with this, that's been surprising to me, is Maddie, my daughter. She's started to, when she first started at the gym, she was all about adding more weight and adding more weight. She wanted to be the strongest kid in the gym. And now she has seen enough of us where she's like, Dad, I just want to work on my technique today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's beautiful to see that from a 9-year-old, because if she works on her technique now, by the time she's 12, she'll be fantastic, right?
She'll be lifting the weights that she wanted to lift when she started.
Exactly. And I think that's crucial, man. So technique first, 100% technique first.
Yes, sir.
All right, man. I think that does for today.
Absolutely. For all of our Sweat Factory athletes out there, we do have our pre-sale going on right now for the Born Primitive swag. We got the sports bra for the ladies, shorts for the guys. So make sure you sign up for that.
Yeah, there's definitely a link on the Facebook. I think Jen set up a Google Doc that people can add their name to. And once we have that pre-order list, we'll go ahead and order those out. And I think that's it for now, man. Good luck to all the teams going to Reindeer Rumble this weekend.
Yeah.
I think we've got like 10 teams going.
I believe so. I had to double check. I think it's 7 teams.
7 teams?
We got 7 teams
7,
right
10,
now.
same number.
Yeah, it's close enough.
My barbell math works everywhere.
Yeah.
All right, guys, this is it for this one. We'll catch you in the next one. Have a good one.
Take care.